Hi, thank you very much for speaking to us today, Naomi. I think it's really interesting what you were saying about Syriza, between what is essentially a false divide between the labour movement and the ecological movement. How do we bridge that gap, and how do we make sure that we have a kind of a common ideology for ecologism and for labour that is united against capital?
Well, that's the task. I'm counting on you to do it. Well, you know, it is true. I mean, I interviewed Tsipras for the book and the documentary that we were doing, and it was kind of an amazing interview. This was about a year and a half ago, and he said, we used to be a party, talking about Syriza, we used to be a party that actually talked a lot about climate change, but we forgot about it. Like, that was his quote. We forgot about it in the midst of the crisis. And you know, I don't think that it is, you know, I don't think it's, you know, obviously there's a strong strain within Syriza which comes from this a developmentalist framework, which is this an extractivist tradition. And this is the same struggle that's happening in many Latin American countries where left-wing governments have been elected and then come into conflict with social movements, particularly indigenous movements. It's happening in Ecuador and Bolivia, Brazil, Argentina. You know, it's not a left-wing government per se, a center-left, whatever you want to call it. But the point is that extraction in most of these countries has increased under left-wing governments, but they're distributing the spoils more justly. Now this, I think, you know, comes also to the issue of climate debt and the fact that there is a greater responsibility for Europeans and North Americans and Australians who've been emitting fossil fuels for a lot longer and at a much higher level, to put justice at the center of our responses to climate change, because that is one of the ways that you can fight the logic of extractivism. I think in its absence, the forces within these countries that are trying to forge another way that isn't just based on depleting the Earth's resources and dividing the spoils more justly, you know, it strengthens those movements, which is why, for instance, in Ecuador, the people who are fighting Correa most strongly on his plans to drill for oil in the Amazon are also the people who really pioneered the concept of ecological debt and climate debt, because you know this is what we can do to help them, but in terms of that framework, it is about moving from an extractivist view of our relationships with one another and with nature. And you know, while thinking about systems, it is important for us to recognize that while the extractivist logic is strongest within capitalism, it is absolutely present within industrial socialism. You know, the only time that global carbon emissions have dipped significantly in the last 50 years was when the Soviet Union collapsed, and two, when the financial collapse happened in 2008, which means, you know, the only time the planet has gotten a break is when communism collapsed and when, you know, capitalism collapsed. So both of these. Yeah, I mean, if I knew the magic formula for how we do this, I would share it. But I think it really is in that hard work of you know, of seizing this moment to try to, you know, not to gloss over these differences. I think there is an openness, and I actually think there is a real desire from some of these political parties to get leadership and vision from below. Because they, you know, some of them are in over their heads. That's what I see, and I think that is definitely true of Syriza, and it will be true if Podemos wins in Spain. Although I think they are more interested in degrowth and a little bit more of a history there.